Typically when I'm sketching, the plants I add are a little more abstract, a little less detailed. So today I wanted to do something a little bit out of my comfort zone, something to challenge me, and pick a plant as the main subject of my sketch. So I picked one of my favorite ones from my apartment, and I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. There's definitely things I would change. Some stuff went wrong, but that's all part of the process, and there are no mistakes. So this is the plant I decided to choose. There's a lot of detail on here, the pot, the different leaves. So I'm using my Lamy Safari fountain pen. This is actually only my second time using it, and I've got it loaded in with the converter and water resistant ink. And my first step is going to be putting dots to show me the height of the plant as well as the bottom of the pot to make sure I stay on the page. But you will see very shortly that that did not exactly work out the way I was intending. I want to keep this really loose, double over some of these lines to give it that sort of sketchy look, and I will occasionally put down dots, but for the most part I am just going to be looking at the plant and drawing from observation. And here I'm just taking my time, and it did come out a little wonky, a little lopsided, but that's the point of a sketch. It's supposed to be rough. You can go over the lines a few times. To me, it all looks fine. And I'm holding my pen really loosely, just sort of getting these little details added in, just to add a little bit of texture, interest. And one thing I love about this plant is the leaves have this really cool two-toned detail, where the outside is sort of yellow and the inside is green, and the way they have these wavy lines that blend the two together, I think it's really cool, really interesting. I'm just working on the second leaf now. One of the challenges of sketching this plant in particular was the perspective of all the different leaves. They were facing away from me, towards me, they were kind of curving, and so really taking my time to try to make that accurate and get that right. And one thing I found while I was doing this sketch was just how relaxing it was. It really just kind of took my mind off everything else, focusing on one simple subject, not overthinking it, not really taking too long, and yeah, I just had a lot of fun. And here I've got this little mushroom decoration in the pot. I wanted to make sure I included that. I think it looks pretty cool. And here's where the leaves start to overlap. Some are in front of each other, some are behind, and I wanted to start with the ones closest to me, the ones that would be in front, just to make sure I don't have too many overlapping lines. And this was really only my second time doing a sketch with this Lamy fountain pen, and I really like it. It's actually the first fountain pen I've ever used, and at this point I realized I had my scale way off, and I just decided to start drawing on the other page because why not? I definitely did not want to overthink this or restart. It's a simple sketch. I'm not taking this too seriously. So here I'm just finishing up the final leaves going back, adding a couple more lines where I think it needs it. And then adding in some detail on the planter itself. I'm not super happy with how this came out. I tried to keep it really abstract and just give the impression that there was some texture and detail, but I got a little carried away, and to me it looks a little messy, but what are you gonna do? So that's it. That is my sketch. Time to move on to the watercolor. And here I'm using the Winsor & Newton Cotman watercolor set. And I wanted to try a wet on wet technique, and you can see right away, I don't think my ink was dry. Even though this is water resistant ink, it started bleeding almost immediately as soon as I laid down fresh water. But I decided to just keep going. I'll make it work. I won't do that for the rest. And here I'm just going to start with sap green and start painting in the inside of the first leaf, leaving the edge for that yellow color to come later. This second leaf turned out a lot better. It's not bleeding quite as much. And here I decided to switch to a mixture of sap green and cadmium yellow and do the outside of the leaves first to create sort of a light border that I can then blend in with the rest. So this first leaf is definitely the worst, but it still turned out okay, I think. And now I can start going around to each of the other leaves and making a border of that yellow color on the outside. So I'm coming from doing a lot of sketches on my iPad. I've been drawing digitally for a while now, and this is one of the few times that I've actually painted with traditional watercolors, and it's a lot of fun. There's definitely a learning curve, so it's good to get some practice in like this. And here I've got a mixture of sap green and viridian hue to make more of a darker bluish green to add a little bit of interest and variation into the green color of the leaves. And here I've just got sap green, and I'm going to paint in the rest of the leaves following the natural direction of the inside of each leaf. And I'm not going quite to the edge, leaving a little bit of white space that I will fill in later with that darker green. Now I'm going to go in with a little more of that viridian hue just to make that green darker and start painting in some of that white area that I left on the leaves, because in my reference I noticed there were some dark green, some light green variation in there. still doing my best to follow the natural direction of the leaves. And it's these layers of paint and going back over it a few times that really give it that texture and interest I was looking for. And this is a mixture of burnt sienna and burnt umber to paint the stem. And I'm going to add a little bit of this to the top of the plant as well, because I can see some other stems at the top. And now I'm mixing in a little bit of lamp black to darken this up, because the soil in this plant is pretty dark, a lot darker than the stem of the plant. And I noticed there's some gold in the pot. I really wanted to just add a little bit of that with this cadmium yellow. Now after that's dried for a minute or two, I'm going to go in with the Viridian Hue and paint in the pot. And now I have just a more saturated Viridian Hue that I'm going to paint on the right side, because the light is directly to my left, so I want to make a bit of a shadow. And I'm just going to use some water to blend that in and soften it up a bit. And now that my first layer has completely dried, I'm making a mixture of alizarin crimson and ultramarine that I will use to paint in some shadows. And I'm starting with the shadow that the pot is casting. And I'm just going to add in some of this purple color wherever I think there might be a shadow, or if something needs a little bit more depth or needs to pop out, I'll add a little bit of this purple on the stem, in between some of the leaves. It just adds that dimension. And I thought my shadow had a little bit too much of a hard edge, so I tried smoothing it out with just some water, and I don't know. And here I'm just taking that same purple and adding some texture with some splatters on the page. This is super fun to do and just adds a cool little visual interest to the piece. And I'm just going to do that with the rest of my colors. This is one of the final steps I like to take. Just make sure when you're doing your splatters you're really careful and you don't slam the paintbrush on the page. Whoops. I can try to fix that. That's fine. There are no mistakes. And you definitely don't want to go overboard with the splatters. It's very easy to do that. It's a lot of fun. Finally, once this is completely dry, I'm going to use my white Posca pen just to make some highlights. I noticed there's little flecks of white in the leaves, but I already left so much white, I don't need to add too much. Also in the potting soil, there are these little white specks that I want to add in, just for a little more visual interest. And anywhere I see light hitting the plant or the pot, I'm going to add just a small highlight, especially on the edge of the planter, things like that. Then here I really tried to capture a little more of the detail in the pot itself, and I don't think it ended up looking exactly how I wanted, but it was something to try out. Let me know what you think. And that's it. Here's the final sketch. Overall, I'm really happy with how this turned out. Definitely some minor mistakes made, but I'm glad I kept pushing through it, and I think it turned out really cool. It was good practice. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. It was a lot of fun. I'm still new to this, I'm learning, I'm practicing. So if you have any tips at all that you'd like to share, let me know. I would really love to hear from you. Thanks again, and see you next time.